guys, Frightener22 here, back again with another Cinema Sickness Daily Servings review. Today we're going to take a look at a DVD that I recently picked up on my most recent trip to Walt Disney World this past October. So we're going to take a look at the 2009 documentary Magic Kingdom, Imagineering the Magic. Now, I picked up two of these DVDs when I was at Disney World, this one and then Disneyland Resort, Imagineering the Magic. And while I really enjoyed the Disneyland documentary while never visiting the Disneyland Resort, it's really thorough and really informative. You know, the whole documentary kind of goes through the early origins and the whole idea of Disneyland, and then kind of going attraction to attraction and just telling like a brief history of that, interviewing the classic Imagineers, many of whom are still alive, and then, newer Imagineers that are still working on the rides or that have contributed to the newer rides. And then on a second DVD that comes with it, they kind of go into about 25 minutes to 30 minutes of Disney's Grand California Adventure. Now this, although it's titled Magic Kingdom, Imagineering the Magic, I was originally left somewhat disappointed, thinking that we didn't get any information about Epcot, Animal Kingdom, or Hollywood Studios, and while I was about to start this review being not exactly negative, but somewhat disappointed, I kind of reminded myself that it's not called Walt Disney World Resort Imagineering the Magic. It's focusing solely on the Magic Kingdom park. So I have kind of myself to kick for that, just thinking that it was going to kind of cover a little bit more than it did. And, for it covering just the Magic Kingdom, it is really informative. It's a little misleading on the back, as it does say it's a 100-minute runtime, but they're actually including the special features and the full documentary feature on the first disc, which is only actually 64 minutes in total. But overall, it takes the same basic format as the Disneyland Resort documentary, focusing on the early origins of Disney World and Walt's entire vision for it. Of course, interviewing the Imagineers along the way, and having a Disney cast member, cutting in to kind of make, brief little narrations to the camera, and, just talking directly with Mickey Mouse and Goofy and Donald and whatnot. And it is pretty informative on that. Although I kind of will have to give the upper hand to the Disneyland Resort for being just that much more thorough, because while this one only had the Magic Kingdom park to focus on and the attractions on that, I still couldn't help but feel they left attractions out that they didn't even talk about. They didn't talk about the Peter Pan ride in Fantasyland. They didn't talk about the Snow White ride in Fantasyland that just recently got taken down and is being replaced by a new Dwarfs coal mine ride. So they left two big things like that out. They didn't talk about the Alice in Wonderland teacups, or, they briefly touch on, for 5 seconds on, the raceway cars in Tomorrowland. So I kind of felt like they left out a lot, considering that they were only focusing on one single park. So for that, I'm gonna kind of have to give this documentary a few points off the top just for that, because those are pretty iconic rides to not even, talk about. So I was a little disappointed that they left that out, because the Peter Pan's Flight is one of my favorite rides at, any Disneyland park. So, overall, it is really informative and cool. You get to see firsthand interviews with people like Marty Sklar, who's been there since, Walt's days, and he's like a Disney ambassador now for the parks and all the resorts and stuff. So he's always really informative when he's on the camera, since he was there basically face-to-face with Walt every step of the way. So that in itself is really interesting, just to hear somebody that, goes that far back to like the golden age with Walt, and he's still around. But overall, I kind of walked into this expecting a little bit more, thinking that they were going to cover the entire, all four parks, and I guess I was left kind of disappointed, although I was still reminding myself towards the end that this did only focus on Magic Kingdom, so we can't really wrong Disney for any kind of false advertisement, because it's right there in the box. But, yeah, I just kind of wish that they, would have gone in and covered the rides a little bit more in detail, and I would just love to learn more about the other parks. I mean, it just seems like there's so much information about Magic Kingdom that I would really like to just learn more about Hollywood Studios and Epcot and Animal Kingdom and stuff. Because one of the things that I find really fascinating is not only the stuff that exists, but the stuff that almost existed or was talked about being existed. Like, for instance, and I'm sure plenty of people are going to research this once I say that, but rides that never came to actual realization, I find fascinating because they're there, on the internet and in books and stuff. It's just a matter of just wanting to find out more. Like, originally, when they were gearing up to release Dick Tracy, they had intentions of opening up a Dick Tracy like Crime Busters ride at Hollywood Studios, but obviously, although it was profitable, it wasn't as profitable for Disney as much as they wanted, and it definitely didn't warrant them to create the ride that they were originally intending to. But there's just like a ton of rides like that that had these ideas, and I'm sure that like a bunch of like preliminary work and designs went into these things, but you just never heard about them. So that's a lot of cool information that I would love to hear and know about, in a book or a documentary or somewhat. And like I said, just learning more about the parks, as they've changed over the years, what's old, what's there currently and stuff like that. And just kind of touching on that now, that is something that this documentary does kind of touch upon, especially in Tomorrowland, like where, Stitch's Great Escape is. They kind of talk about how Alien Encounter used to be there, and you see shots of that from like the, I guess the late 80s, early 90s, and, they talk about the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ride. So it's kind of cool that they do kind of bring up the older rides that aren't there anymore. They talk about Mickey's Toontown Fair, which is cool because that's no longer there. So things like that are always really interesting because it's just a nice way to time capsule those things since they're gone, and you never really know if they're ever going to come back. So overall, this is an informative documentary. Disney, never really disappoints when it comes to kind of teaching people about their history, with their films or their parks or whatever. It's just not as thorough as I would have hoped. So overall, out of the two, the Disneyland Resort documentary is definitely better than this one, but overall, still a fun watch. It's Disney. You can't go wrong. All this does is just kind of get me in the mood and, counting the days until my next trip to Disney World. Well, guys, that's all the time I got for you this time. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another Cinema Sickness Daily Servings review, and definitely tune in later on today where my latest DVD update will be posted. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll catch you guys in another video. This has been Frightener22.